Hello. Hey, hi. It is I, Dr. B Boop, and today's podcast episode is on a show I saw in December of 2023, Ella Vos and Blond in Car. This show took place at the Analog at Hutton Hotel venue in Nashville. And I think I'd like to take just a moment to talk about this particular venue. There isn't really anything like this, at least not in Florida. It is just a room in this hotel in downtown Nashville where they have organized it specifically for the acoustics. This this particular place is very intimate. And it's also where I think it might have even been the very next night I saw Michael McDonald do sort of a conversation with the gentleman who helped him write his book. And that talk was one that he chose to do for the book, and it's on PBS. You can't see me in the video. You can't. Like, if you're like, click, click, I'm going to go find and, see Dr. B Boob. No, I'm in the dark because there was a relatively small section of the room where those of us who paid, just like I would say, something totally reasonable, possibly even minimal, to be there. I don't think that I quite had it in my head what this event would be like, but because of the Ella Vos show, I was able to picture it a little bit easier. But because of the Ella Vos show, when I saw Michael McDonald, because of the Ella Vos show, I was able to get a good feeling of the venue on the night in order to sort of mentally prepare for what I thought at the time would be a much more momentous event for me. I have running jokes, running jokes about Michael McDonald with some people I know, but more along the lines about the fact that he could sing so good that they would have him do a single line in a song. Like, one of the songs that was the repeat offender and jokes about Michael McDonald. And I want to just be clear that I'm not heading off into Michael McDonald. This is editing be popping in to say that one of the songs that was a repeat offender is Christopher Cross's Ride Like the Wind. You've probably heard this song if you know who Michael McDonald is, right? But he just sings like one line. And it's very, very Michael McDonald. But I will talk more about him when I get to that event, which I suppose is now going to be the next one, right? So back to Ella Vos. I thought at the time that the Michael McDonald thing would be far more momentous, but it turned out that the Ella Vos show with Blond and Car had a very particular effect in a time when I really, really needed it. So, as I was saying, this is a Substack post with photos and videos of the event, but I want to just and I do think that you should go look at those because Ella Vos was working with green. Green, I believe she was saying that green is like a color of healing. Um, and I felt that very, very much with her presence. I felt that between Blonde and Car and Ella Vos, like I was getting the best dopamine hit ever, but also the kind that just makes you feel a little high. And here's the thing, like there were jokes between like from both of them about, about about drugs or whatever, but and Blonde in Car has a bunch of jokes that she tells or was telling on the regular for a while there. It was about that. But honestly, something, sort of one of the comments I made was that my glass of wine that I purchased was just completely unnecessary. In fact, I'm looking at the piece on Substack and it says how Ella Vos and Blonde in Car reset my nervous system at Analog at Hutton. And I just the subtitle there is they made my glass of wine unnecessary. And I do recall like leaving it sitting on the table. Not only was it unnecessary by the end of that show, it was kind of like it seemed like, well, that would be a little too mellow because at that time, it's a good reminder to think that the place that I was staying was anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours outside of Nashville. And that's because, it might have been like 75 miles away, depending on where in Nashville I was headed at the time, but it would depend on the lighting, everything when you're driving in those hills. But to get on track with the show, I can start off by saying a few things about the way that I felt when I stepped into the room because it was momentous. I stepped into the room and it was like an immediate vibe switch. Meaning, I think I must have been stressed out because when I stepped into that room, I thought, well, this is peaceful. It's very clearly going to be intimate. Look at these couches. Like there were couches and stuff there. And it was what I needed at the time. What I needed at the time. So, uh, the way that the way that I talk about this show is similar to the other 2023, second or last part of 2023 posts that I've made. But this one, I think I understood more that I really was on the precipice of change because this was the night, this was the night that I first began to think, I don't think I'm going back to Florida yet. And I think I felt that at this show. And so, to some degree, Blond and Car and Ella Vos were sort of responsible um, for me going back and forth, spending more time in Nashville. But I was also, when I say on the precipice of change, I really meant that because this was the time when I decided, or this period of time, rather, at some point, I would say that it would have been the November 7th show from that year of Nation of Language. I would say that that would have been the night that I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay longer, right? But this was the night where I thought, maybe I want to move here. Maybe that's what I want. Maybe I want to move here. And I'll tell you what, I'm in Florida, but that is sort of a goal. Although I have to say that I really am beginning to come to terms with the fact that I'm kind of a wanderer now. I'm a little bit of a nomad. A good friend of mine that I love very dearly made sent me something so harmless, and it had like the word nomad in the title. And of course, knowing me, it was like, please, all I needed in that moment was just a tiny thing in order to like just lose it. And have this moment of like, oh my God, but it's overreacting. It's just that there are moments when my nervous system is, more vulnerable than other times, right? And that just happened to be it. But I'm beginning to think that that really is a huge part of who I am as a person. And so the next step in life, wherever that leads, like wherever I wind up living, full time, it's going to be a weird adjustment in the beginning. But I will say, wherever it is, they're going to have a lot of music. But I think that I don't think that that's something anybody would have thought otherwise. So, something I remember about uh, about this night, something I remember was walking to my car and, after this show, which I'll get to. But I remember walking in my car and was just remarking um, on the fact that I really didn't feel like I needed a heavy coat. And like, I think that is something I think about because as a Floridian who knows most Floridians will absolutely say, I'm not going up there. It's cold. Why would I go where it's cold? And I'm like, I don't know. I just found it invigorating. Um, I really was thinking that at the time, yeah, I liked all those things that were different from home. But In December 2023, I knew that I had a lot of decisions to make about what I was supposed to do next in life. And that night, I decided I wasn't done exploring. That's for sure. I knew I wanted to stay in Tennessee and learn more about Nashville, but I wasn't convinced that meant I needed to move there just yet. But this show, I remember driving home from this show and then, arriving at the Michael McDonald show was the next one. And that was when I was like, yep, I think I'm going to try. But I hadn't expected Ella Vos's voice to put me in such a relaxed, pleasant state, one where I could think about my future without the chaos in my life clouding everything. For once, I felt some hope. I needed that. I might have stepped off one roller coaster, but I hadn't left the park. That's the best way I can explain it now. Looking back from my 2025, now 2026 vantage point. The Ella Vos post that is about the December 2023 show was written and published in August of 2025. It's funny. I say something I joke about a lot is how I'm never timely. But something I'm understanding with the way that I order my posts and whatnot, that not only am I not timely in like a sense of, hey, this is the perfect moment to drop something. Now it's also, hey, what month in my own personal history am I in? And I'm not necessarily doing them in order. But so that year in 2023, my friend who owns a camp in rural Tennessee and I agreed on a plan. I'd figure things out and she could use the extra funds, but a thought surfaced. This was a moment in my life I couldn't get back. I knew I'd never have this level of freedom again. I had to keep going and I had to see my exploration through to the end. So I was thinking, why don't I just stick around? So my friend sent me a flyer about the Ella Vos show at Analog at Hutton, and I snapped up my ticket. I noticed the name Blond in Car, but I had no idea who she was at that time. Um, I I went through a weird period of time with TikTok, and I'm still not really over there as much, but I think, as I was saying, I think that's kind of where she blew up. But I noticed the name Blonde and Car, but, again, no idea who she was. As I've said a million times, I'm not always going to be timely when it comes to marketing, but once I've found you and write about you, it can be a great reminder. So I walked into that venue and something happened. A silence that wasn't exactly silence. I get that it's an intentional acoustic setup, but this felt different. I'm never going to fully understand my own ear, but I'll say this. I have something akin to synesthesia. My nervous system responds through my ears a lot. Sometimes it's tinnitus, and sometimes it's a strange vibration that registers as sound, kinda. And if you know me well enough, if you know me, then you know that I went through a very long period of time with one of the most awful cases of tinnitus. Like it was truly awful. I went through this period where I would just lie on my couch, and it was like it, it was howling in my ears. Like, I don't have words for it just yet, what that was like. It was so awful that I would just cry. And other people would say, oh, well, be, you have people, practicing or, rehearsing in your living room all the time. Doesn't that make it worse? And I would say, no, it makes it so much better. I love it when the guys come over and play because I can sit in my living room and be sick, and then they can just, they can drown out the tinnitus. Yeah. Side note, I am so grateful that's not a condition I continue to have. For those of you who are like, what? How did you manage to overcome the tinnitus? And the answer is this: You have to drop your anxiety. You have to find something, anything that drops your anxiety. Otherwise, you have no opportunity to integrate this particular sound, right? So, and that has to happen. But I'm going to have some pieces up on the Substack that deal with things like chronic illness, trauma, and that's just another moment for me to make sure my audience knows that I have a history of trauma scholarship. Um, I also had a chronic illness for years, and that chronic illness was one of the reasons, like, it was one of the factors that wound me up in Nashville to begin with, was trying to overcome a brutal chronic illness that affected. It's like if one thing was impacted, then everything else was. It was like dominoes. But I also managed. I also managed to overcome that. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. Um, and I'll go ahead and say this. I'll drop just a line of this here, and that is, music is one of the ways that I overcame my chronic illness, more specifically, live music. So, this would have been in late 2022 and then early 2023. I went back to live shows, like touring shows. I had about 12 years of just constant live music experiences, but they were typically local bands that I knew and not as much touring bands. But I went back to touring bands because it was like I knew that I needed the drive to practice my driving, to sort of get out of my own head with the anxiety. I needed to stand for a while and just sort of gain that strength back. But then I also needed the sound that was going to bring down my anxiety, and then it also started to help drown out and then help me recover from the tinnitus. When I tell you that live music is healing, I mean that in every sense of the word. Every sense of the word. Yeah, yeah. So, what I would say about the Ella Vos and Blond and Car show is that it was healing. And that is what Ella Voss's message was for that album. Kind of still is. It's kind of just sort of at the core, I think, of the way she sees herself as an artist. Um, but it was so healing. And there were some things I kicked myself for. I kicked myself because I have this tendency to not approach artists. Like, I think a lot of people sort of, one of their goals is to like run toward the artist if they can after a show. And I do the opposite. Like, if I'd been at the Ryman when Nick Cave came out, if I'd been there, and if he'd come out, which he wouldn't do that, he'd probably be swamped. But if he had, I would have run the opposite direction. Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to be different because now that I'm a writer, now that I write about music in this fashion and have a podcast and everything, yeah, it's probably time to start talking to artists. But at the end of the show that night, Ella and Blond and Car, Ella Vos and Blond and Car, were over by the table and they were selling records. They were selling merch. And I was standing in the line to go and like walk up to the front, but I held back and I thought, no, don't purchase anything. Like if we want tickets for something, but also I feel nervous. I feel like I'm kind of like, am I being annoying right now trying to talk to this artist? And odds are artists are probably like, no, no, I literally came here and played. I literally walked out to my table. You can say hello. I don't know. I think that that's something about me that will change. But I was also very self-conscious at that time because and this is something I understand. Well, the way that I looked at that point, right? The way that I appeared at that point is not the way I saw myself in my head. In fact, I very much still catch myself thinking that I'm the person in the photos where I was sick. I've toyed with the idea of sharing one of the photos from when I was very, very sick, because I don't think people who met me afterward have a real grasp on how bad it was. Um, and I think even the people that did know me during that time likely didn't know how bad it was because I didn't go out very often. I got to a point where I stopped like leaving the house, right? So I was also terrified to drive. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. But that should say to others that what I was doing was extremely brave at that time. And I continue to be brave, but um, yeah, it was brave to not only get back in my car and drive. And all of 2023, that's what I was doing, getting in my car and driving to a show where I would walk around, possibly buy a t-shirt. I love band tees, but they just got too expensive for me. So walk around, get a little bit of strength, little bits of exercise or whatever, and get some social interaction. Though I didn't really, single serving friends are great for that. So by the time I arrived at the show that night, I think I needed my anxiety to calm down because I just had so much going on, so much going on inside my mind. Like, oh no, what decisions do I make? What can I expect? But I think that night at the show, I kind of had a moment where I was like, I don't have to figure all of it out right now. Yeah. But that night, what I heard, and this is the word that I used, and it's correct, and that is sublime. It was a sublime flow, and a tingle of release ran down my entire back, and that was from the moment I really sat down, and that was, I mean, from the moment Blond and Car was playing. But that part isn't unusual, I know. But if I add that, I heard the green and blue lights in the tapestries, like this sound when your head slips under the water at the beach. Maybe that is unusual, just it adds sparkly sound, right? What I'm trying to do is say that I know the difference between what the song is and then what my response is with this weird form of synesthesia. Now, I'm not sure it's synesthesia, okay? But I think most people who know me know that there's something weird about my ear, about my ear. And even when I knew less about music history, which I learned in my last relationship, when I knew less about music history, I was still able to pull out, well, that sounds like this. And why do I hear, and I could reference a different band in here, so I was able to do that. I just didn't quite have a lot of the words to say, oh, I think this right here is sublime. So um, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not claiming to make sense to everyone, but still I feel it again just by writing about it, recalling the moment and the way it felt that, especially in this moment where I'm talking. I mean, obviously I'm a writer, but to some degree, I mean, I see myself as more of a creative yapper, maybe. Um, we didn't have the same kind of access to recording equipment, but when I started writing, but I can recall that moment and the way that it felt. What I needed in December 2023 was to heal. The truth is, I had to learn more before I could heal, but for a while, I caught a break. There was a lot more for me to learn, and yeah, it wasn't fun. 2025 wasn't fun. I mean, ugh. Anyway, but Analog at Hutton was like a cave inside or like an enclave where the sound is pleasing in the way no sound can feel. But I was also gobsmacked by how close I was going to be. I grabbed a spot on this terribly inviting couch and felt better about everything instantly. The colors she chose, the simple setup, it felt personal and healing. And that was Ella Vos's goal. She did that beautifully. So for Blond in Car's set, So I'm sitting on the couch like the most comfy meetup ever. Like we're gonna put on masks on our faces and watch our favorite show, but it's a beep boop pop star instead. I sat there and chatted a tad before Blond and Car took the stage. For those unaware, Blonde and Carr's song about her daughter called My High Gummy Girl went viral on TikTok. That's how she was discovered. She plays the omnichord and drops these great covers of unexpected songs. It's delightful. It really is. I just never caught that. At first, it's endearing and isn't a dig at her daughter. If her mother isn't high, then it's because you don't need it with that sound. Does that, I mean, I hope that that makes sense. I think that if you were to go sit down and choose your good speaker, like wherever you can play with your good speakers, whether that's in your car, that's your favorite acoustic setup or whatever, but I think that's probably why Blonde and Car, why that's probably the name she chose. A lot of people do social media stuff from their car because it's like a great acoustic setup, right? And so just get this feeling that she was sitting in that car and just writing all these sublime, songs that make you feel a little high. They do, but I mean that's the power of music. But they analog at Hutton, it had. I'm not 100% sure if it's the same today, right? Like they could have added a different stage. I don't know, but what I'll say is that that night it was like there's a little platform. Like I would not necessarily say that it's a full stage. It's not like I guess high enough. Ironically, it's not high enough to be like a stage in my mind, but it's a platform. Um, but it's just enough for you to be able to have a really good view of the artist. But when she stepped out onto the little platform, I felt like this was a version of myself locked inside somewhere, dressed in saturated colors like a strange modern fairy. I chose all black that night, but inside I was lit up like bright pink. Um, P.S. The color pink has a lot of meaning to me, especially when I wear, punk pink colors in a goth context. I really stand out. I know that I do. But the moment she started singing Blonde and Card, the moment she started singing, I thought, oh my God, this sounds so smooth and sublime, and every muscle had relaxed without leaving me exhausted. It wasn't tired. It was just so peaceful. But fun fact, as I was saying, analog at Hutton is made for sound, but our phones are terrible at translating that into video. And in fact, our phones typically are. I know a lot of artists will say things about how they cringe a little bit when they hear themselves like on social media because they have to remind themselves that they don't sound the way they're sounding, right? And the thing too is that if you're somebody who takes a lot of videos on your phones at shows and you sit and you listen to it the next day, you know that they didn't sound like that. You know they sounded a completely different way, a lot better, a lot they sing better live. They just, everything just sounds better live than it does recorded live and then fed through your phone. And that's why, like, if I start coming to events and I offer the service of going live on the Substack for some musicians, if they request it, I will definitely try to have like an my iRig, and then just sort of get the aux. But yeah, it doesn't translate in the videos on the Substack. But so we're left with the whole concept of presence in the absence of satisfactory digital representations of something that happened in a room in December 2023. So that's like 2 years ago at this point, right? It's January 19th, and this is dropping on January 20th. Oh my God. Are we already there? It still feels like New Year. But anyway, so I had a glass of wine, I think, but I barely touched it throughout the entire show. This was the moment I really did think, I'm gonna move here, aren't I? At the time, and even now, I think, well, if I'm going to be alone in the world, like if it's just going to be me for the rest of my life, then I need to be in rooms that make living worth it. I think a lot of us, when when we're younger, or even when we get older and we're more self-assured, I think if you haven't spent enough time alone, then you don't have a clear idea of who or what is right for you. And if you haven't been alone enough to fully meet yourself, face the parts of you that might not be fun, face your depression, face the things that you experience, if you're not alone long enough to know what all of that feels like, then you're not riding the roller coaster to its completion, right? Like you're continuing to ride the same one over and over and over again, and it won't complete because every time you go up and you take that drop, right? You just look for another person to take you back up again. So when you spend time alone, like a lot of time alone, like I think I'm done. I'm done with my time alone, right? But that's been 4 years of mostly alone. But what I can say is that this has been the most profound 4 years in my life, even if they were excruciating. And I say 4 years because it was about 4 years ago that my last relationship, my long-term relationship, ended. So what I moved toward, all four of these years was figuring myself out because I wanted a chance at life. I wanted a chance to experience something that didn't require another person constantly in order to feel like I was enjoying life. Yeah. If you love music, okay, let's take a moment here because this is an important message, right? So right here, when we're talking about Blond and Car and Ella Vos, I want you to think for a moment, what is it that I need to heal? If you can't answer that question, then I just have to ask if you've spent enough time alone with yourself. Figuring out what you're capable of doing alone. I think the time that I've spent alone, the time that I've spent mostly alone, has been so profound because I'm definitely able I'm definitely able to do anything I want to do alone. If nobody else wants to go to a show, I'm not held back by the idea of, oh, I don't want to go eat alone, or, oh, I don't want to go to a show alone. Like now I'm like, oh, um, if I invite you to come to a show with me, or if I meet up with you at a show, that just means that you add to the show to some degree, or you don't take away, at least. I have perfected that art of doing everything alone at this point. Um, and I think that this this was really an essential moment in coming to terms with that because all through 2023, like not as much 2022, and there are a lot of things that happened in 2022 to make 23, 24, and 25 like happen, right? But uh in terms of 2023, that was the year I learned to do everything alone. And I started to really love it. Like if you go to a show alone, think about all the things that you like to do at a show. And if you don't know, like if you're pausing and you're like, wait, what do I like to do at a show? It's typically, it's typically dependent on who's with me. Oh, and then that's like, well, it's time to start going to shows alone. Like it really is. Or at least to go to shows, do things alone enough to know what it is you like to do. Right. Right. I think that there are people in my life that are like, I kind of want to go to that show with her, but I don't think she wants to go to a show with other people. So it's the opposite. Um, but this moment was a time in my life when I really was doing it alone. Like I going up to Tennessee mostly alone. I mean, my friend had given me like some uh initial ideas on the maps of like where to go, right? But everything I figured it all out completely alone. It's pretty brave and it's pretty exciting. But what I can say I have now is that despite the fact that I'm gonna complain that I'm lonely, I'm gonna complain that I'm lonely. And it's just like the other night, I was like, this is stupid. Like, why am I don't need to heal anymore. But, but I think that I've healed beyond a point where I'm like, well, not only do I not need to have a partner in my life on the level of a need that I feel like I can't get through life without another person. That's it's very eye-opening. And so what you can do then is turn and choose a person, because I'm sure I'm going to find my person or a person, right? I'm sure I am at some point if I like live long enough in order to experience that. But I know that I will, but what I can say now that I wouldn't have been able to say 3 years ago is that they're gonna have to add to my life. I will never say this. Never. I'm gonna do like I'm running by. I will never. I will never chase a person to stick around in my life. Nope. Especially when I know how to live well on my own. So anyway, back to the Ella Vos show. So as I was saying, the show was really a lot about healing, and you know, I know it sounds confusingly like backhanded hope, but it was also real. I think now I still feel that way. The economy sucks. Everything sucks. Uh, um, but I explored other careers in 2025. Um, and had a period of time when I thought that I might be place bound in my hometown, which is where I am at this moment. But yeah, I already decided no, 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 it's not. um, but I mean, when I'm alone, the freedom to do whatever the fuck I want is intoxicating. So there I was, just enjoying this environment and the serenity I felt. I feel like that's kind of where I am again, but I've just painfully shed another layer of things that weigh me down. I picked this show back up and decided to write about it in August, this past August, because I was feeling this way again. And I'm doing this tonight because I still feel like I'm reflecting on that moment. And I think because starting the podcast portion of this program sort of necessitates taking people through this moment in my life in order to understand where I was in life and the things that I'm going to do in season one, or excuse me, season two. Season two of this podcast is going to be Absolution Fest 2023. There's a full series on the Substack and it's already there. It's a little messy. I just knew that I had to write my way through all of that, right? But um, so I remember sitting on the couch at Analog at Hutton. Blond in Car is playing, and there was something about the sublime experience. Um, but if I were to say, hey, beep, let's go back to the day before the Ella Vos show. And if I were to say, hey, beep, what does healing sound like? Like, what does healing sound like? I might have said it feels like a calm room with green tapestries and an electronic serenity created by women in beautiful outfits. Yeah, I might have. But Blondin Carr talked about her superstar song, and I am so pissed at myself that I caught almost none of that song um, on the video, but her whole set was just this serene sound, basically as if you were high. Like I said, you just don't need it when you're present. That's, I don't know. I think that's a fantastic goal, a fantastic goal with music. by the time she stepped away, I really was ready for Voss's set. Like it was like I pre-gamed with a gummy. I did it. I'm just saying. I don't think either one of them would disagree with that assessment, though. It's the best kind of compliment ever. So on the Substack, there is a video with Ella, and she's singing, and she's got like the green tapestries, and then she's got this beautiful bright green flowy, like it looks like I think it was a cloak or a frock of some kind. And then she also has, her table that has the beep boop maker. That's what I call it. Anyway, her beep boop maker, and it's got like a green cloth. So it's a lot of green. It's very saturated, but it feels the way I'm describing it. There's also other photos of her with the green on the Substack, but what I was saying is that she has that sexy little ultra femme voice when she greeted Nashville. It gave me chills. It's also adorable, but you really did need to be there to catch any of what I'm trying to communicate. And thus, we get to a major point I'm embedding in this piece. We are longing for presence. We are. But if you can think back to 2023 and go back in your mind and make a list or look at schedules, whatever, and start looking at who was touring in 2023, because what you'll see was a bunch of Gen X bands like The Cure leading the way. And it felt like a concerted effort to bring us out of our houses in 2023. Like, I think by the time 2023 comes around, everybody's like, how do we get them to leave their houses? They're still kind of scared. Like, we have to make something that's just irresistible. And that's when it was like The Cure launches a tour, which I missed. um The Cure toured. I saw Depeche Mode twice in 2023. Yeah, so just it felt like it was an irresistible force to get us out of our house. We were not going to miss some of those bands, okay? We were not going to miss those bands. But I was instantly pleased with her presence. She really is a divine little human, making the beep boops with angelic vocals that make you feel a little bit high. The tour that year was to support her album Superglue. I was listening to it when I wrote the piece, right? Because I do have the piece pulled up in front of me. And that is something I do. Side note, I do that. If I'm going to write a piece and it's going to be about like the band Alice, right? That was Alice is the band that opened for Absolution Fest 2025 last October. I played their songs, I played it while I was writing the piece. And sometimes when I do that, you end up getting all these little Easter eggs in a piece. And so a band can go and read a piece that I wrote about them, and they might be able to, because obviously they have the most knowledge of their work, they might be able to pull things out like, oh, this sounds like this song was playing. It's in there. They're in there. But yeah, I was listening to it when I wrote about the show, and I said that it felt both a million years away and like I'm standing there again at the same time. Yeah, I guess this just goes back to the whole beep is not timely, but then it might be like beep respects my time, but not time as a concept, something like that. But it's recall meets time travel. Yeah. Standing on 2023 me's 4 feet. It hurts past me, but she also understands. Maybe the two of us past me, August me, maybe the three of us now me, maybe the three of us could have just a good cry, release all the things we both feel, and maybe even have a conversation between us. Yeah, and I can sort of do that in my head right now, the conversations between these different versions of me, which, you know what? Maybe I'll do that. Maybe that's content. But the point is that I was committing to figuring myself out, that so that future choices would be built on a foundation where rejection could no longer control me. That, my friends, is what the current version of me can do. I think the show brings this feeling up because it represents that corner of Voss's work where the serene feels propelled forward by a gentle beat. Pull their music up, pull up super glue, right? And another example of how this kind of feeling works with her music, I get that it would be easy to say this isn't complicated, but digital representation disallows the sharing of it as it was that night, right? You're not going to be able to get that. It's a single serving. I've said this before. It is a single serving of something that can never be repeated in the most decadent way. This will never happen again. Yeah. It can't hand you what's real. It can only show you a corner of the past, just enough to make you wish you'd been there. Yeah. Just enough for me to make you wish you'd been there. But I think what you might be hearing, like if there's part of you that hears me talking in these shows and you're like, oh my God, this just sounds fantastic. Maybe the person that you're longing for is yourself. Maybe what it is that you are alienated from some part of yourself because you haven't allowed yourself to do things alone, because you haven't allowed yourself to find out how freaking cool you are to be around as a person, and how it feels, how self love starts to make you feel offended by the people who would mess up your vibe. Like, if you're not going to add to it, then GTFO, right? But one of the unintended things that my work does, and now I know it's there, but I really wasn't thinking about it at the time until I got enough feedback where people were like, oh man, that just sounds so awesome. That whole experience, just taking off someplace else and doing everything that you want to do and getting to know yourself. And I'm like, you know what? You can do that. You can do that. And maybe you should. But I create FOMO. That is what I do. I create FOMO. If the what I have found, the best way to create buzz is it's just to show yourself enjoying it, right? Like, I'm going out to this show. It's all over my socials. You can look and you can see that I love going to shows, that I have experiences at shows. I write all this stuff about the thoughts that I had, and the meaning that I find in a live music experience that is not only the sound. But that's what working from a position of curiosity about yourself, about live music, about bands, about musicians, and my interest in musicians as people and as part of their work is actually relatively new in my life. But it's not intentional marketing at all, or it wasn't, but I go to good fucking shows and recreate those experiences for you on a day when you need to feel something. Maybe if you do listen to this on Tuesday mornings, and that's kind of like the wisdom, drop it at 5 a.m. because people want to listen on a Tuesday when they're going to work kind of scenario. This is just the research I did about that. But that's when you need to feel something, and sometimes feel something other than the fact that it's Tuesday. But Voss she isn't only defined by that particular formula. She makes great music for driving in the hills, great music as background for good conversations, or as soundtrack for thinking about the past in a dreamy state, all while wondering what to do for your future self. Think of it. If you are sitting next to you, if you're sitting next to you and you're like, listen, you know that we have let a lot of people take from us, and we seem to keep doing that. How do we how do we not let that happen in the future? And the thing is, I step up and I'm talking to the both of you and I'm like, well, listen, you have to learn how to release yourself from your toxic attachment, for starters, like, and test yourself so that when you're able to say nope and you're able to walk away, that it's so empowering, because then what you feel is that you have hope for a better future. And for some of us, especially now when we're having these huge battles about, is it a male loneliness epidemic, or women do, whatever it is, right, but figuring out what to do for your future self. But what I'm describing about the versions of me is something that can't be drawn with clear lines. And as I was writing this, the recall of how I felt becomes a little jumbled by the pain in my chest, by how badly I need presence, physical connection, face-to-face conversations, and all the other things that make humans real for a brain that turns people into concepts when they're reduced to text messages and DMs. If you don't call me, I can't think about you properly. And I can feel those things and still sort of refuse to be torn asunder. This might be the one piece that I wrote where I cannot satisfactorily share what I heard and felt, because it goes beyond the certainty of linguistics. I can't feel confident that my descriptions of these things resonate when I can't even fully explain them myself. I don't want to talk to Al. I want to talk to you, even if it means we're on video. Like, yeah. But when she came out draped in green fabrics and that relaxed sound, I remember thinking that maybe I was supposed to also pregame with a gummy, but it's illegal in the great state of Tennessee. But I was so close at this show that I felt enveloped in the sound, which is, if you see me and I'm like, get out of my way, I got to be at the front, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to necessarily have like the artist remember who I am. I mean, that works, especially if you write about things like I do now, but I really want that envelopment in the sound. And that's, I don't want an outside feeling at most shows. Sometimes I think people mistake this for only wanting to catch all the Pokemon, It's just that what I've developed is a system of thought and action that forces me out of my house, helps me choose things I know I'll be happy about later, and turns my life into a platform for an art form from within the crowd. That's what this has become. And that's really what Hyperactive Ghost is. It is an art form that has formed through the reflections on another art form. And I think something that is also unique when you write about the live music experience in this way is that it is also writing. A lot of these lines that I type later, I'm typing it later, but I thought them, I have notes, and I'm writing them from inside the live sound. If you think about it in that way, then you see what it is I'm trying to represent. But, I guess I said that maybe I just wanted to feel the presence of people around me, but I guess that is part of it too. Like, it is a good way to get around other people and sometimes have some shorter conversations with the single serving friends, but you don't need them to do all the things that you want to do, right? Okay. We all know social media is fucked and isn't going to be the same. It's not going to be the same again, ever. I don't know what's next because it's going to need a monkey branch I cannot see, but it's going to be gone soon, my friends. Are we mad? No, we are tired and struggling to find a way back to each other. Live music. I think what Voss creates, at least for me, is kind of like that moment after an ordeal when you're just so exhausted and you realize that you're safe and can let it all out. Like that moment, like, oh, I can breathe. I'm safe. Now I can express all the things without feeling shame, right? Because that is one of the things that keeps us from expressing the way we really feel, and that is that we feel ashamed for the way that we feel, right? That's what we experience. But maybe it's her femme energy that beckons you into the water to rinse off your troubles. Maybe maybe it's a gentler energy that makes it safe to feel the kind of pleasure that unlocks our nervous system so we can just release. Maybe it's that Voss is now a mother, like she is now a mother, and that destiny was already in her voice at the time. Maybe that's what I was also hearing. For those of you who don't know, and I don't see why you would know, I lost my mother when I was 21 years old, and I lost my mother only 5 years after losing my brother, right? So it was, and that's not even all of the stuff that's in my other podcast, but I don't know. I just know what it feels like to be in a room designed for artists like Voss to sound this way in person. Something I think we're all feeling right now is that we're yearning to be physically present. We feel deeply alone, and it seems like we shouldn't feel that way as we're arguably more connected than ever. What we're forgetting is our sense of humanity and that feeling of someone standing in front of us, and it feels more electric. I think that our lack of physical presence is something that has seemed for a very long time like it was easier to eschew. Like we're not lonely in our room at 2 a.m. when we can pick up the phone and we can scroll, or at least cognitively, that's what we can say. Well, what do you mean I'm not alone? My friends are right here in my devil box, right? Like they're right here in my devil box and in my smaller devil box, right? Like that's, but we are lonely. We just aren't aware that we need physical presence. We're so deeply lonely. And this was a paper that my students were writing. I don't teach anymore, or at least I don't teach in higher education anymore. But there were these research projects that a bunch of my students did within the last like 5 years, 6 years of my career. And they were trying to get to the bottom of this. My students were researching it, and they're like, why do I feel so lonely all the time when everyone is right here? And that a lot of them concluded this, right? But there's much larger research projects on it, but I could see them searching, given that they're younger and they don't have a history they can look back to where everything was physically present or nothing at all. That's kind of a strange privilege that I feel like I have at Gen X. But even listening to them talk about it, I was like, oh my God, that is so true. We do feel that. We just don't know it. Social media keeps us alienated from ourselves. And if we continue to think of it as anything other than a storefront for who we are and the other things we do, we're going to continue to feel alone. Yeah, I don't know. I think that staying in Tennessee was another flick of a domino that took me to the place I needed to be to change the most toxic parts of my life. Over identification with our careers can trip us up when the industry moves right, but our goals continue to the left. And that's sort of what happened to me. I think too that in the last year of my career in higher education, that was something that I was beginning to understand, that maybe I was a little bit of the old guard and maybe we needed the new blood in. But at the same time, it's also like, wait, though, if you don't have these references for your experience, then you're missing something from the equation. Like if a Gen Xer wasn't there to say to my students in those 6 years or so, where they were really trying to get to the bottom of this and say, do you know that there was a time when I would have looked at you like you had three heads if you said to, if you said to just speak to somebody in a room without a corded phone, right? Like, even speakerphone. But anyway, but my choice that night to stay, was it the right thing to do? Yeah. Yes, it was. Even if I had made choices for myself that others cannot understand, what I learned is that I wanted to live in Nashville. I still do, but it might not happen. But the point there is that I know now I can turn around and look at my at the state of Florida, and I can say, well, here are the things that I love. For example, if you're broke, Florida is a great place to live because you don't feel as confined by the need to spend with everything that you do. Just go to the beach, right? Like a little bit of gas to get there. That's it. But honestly, my closest confidants are in Florida. They're down here. Disney beckons me for an annual pass. My family is here. For those of you who just aren't, you don't have like a glimpse of what it's like to live in Orlando, because I did for most of my life lived in Orlando, even though I grew up in Daytona. Um, if you don't know what it's like to have Disney right there, then think of it this way. Like if you're in Nashville and you think the way that you feel about the music industry, the way that you feel about having this great access to live music and everybody that comes through here, the way that you look at music that you sense is different from the way other people look at the music industry. That is how we feel about theme parks, um, anything and everything that Disney, Universal, like all the stuff they make. You low key, you can drive there and take maybe 30 minutes to get there. You pop in and you can experience any of it. And it can, to some degree, it can make having entertainment a lot less expensive than it would than you might think. But I have a memoir to restart. The moment a thing I cannot talk about publicly lands in my lap next month. Yeah, that's a thing landed in my lap in September. I did not know it was going to happen until it would have been July for sure. And when I found out, I was like, "Oh my God," I cried. Um, it was money. That's what it was. It was money. It was money. Money I needed, um, but it it makes sense to be here when all of the events are in my hometown. It's crazy to me that I swore I'd never return to my hometown, but it turns out that coming back here would be momentous. Just as going up there was momentous, returning was also momentous because I had things to take care of. I had unfinished business with Florida, I think. So I keep talking to the different versions of myself, like the conversation is supposed to land on ways that make me feel like a more unified person. It's so sad to think about the way people can treat other people, especially children. And that, if that seems like that's coming out of like left field, that's because that's the arguably much larger, more complicated creative project I've had going on. Yeah, it's a lot. Like I will record an episode or a draft of it and I'll cry for a month. So it's been taking me forever to get this done, but I've spent years existing now just for me, making myself look like the bad person by choosing me over and over again. I'm allowing myself for somebody to say, "Oh, she chose herself. Well, F her, she's terrible." Okay, But the conversation with past me went like this. Now me, standing on 2023 me's 4 feet. I know this hurts you. 2023 me. It does. But I know you need to tap into something that will make better sense to you. We are happy in 2023 and I have my feet planted in soil. Now me. Yes, but I think I want to make better sense to me. I'm 50 now. 2023 me. No, I really think there's someone else to make sense to, and you have to acknowledge her. Now me. Spot? Yeah. I'm working on that podcast. I just can't do anything until the thing we talked about drops in our lap. And then like now me, like this January 2026 me is like every time we think that we're centered, something else comes along. But there comes a point And for those who aren't aware, Spot is what I call the child version of myself in conversations about dissociation and trauma. That version of me. And if you've ever met that part of me, like if you've ever watched me like be fully unmasked, do all the trauma things, like I will talk with my hands. I just like something as I started to talk with my hands. I will talk with my hands and I do all this stuff. And it's like when you meet that version of me, you know you're meeting the traumatized child. It's funny, it's cute, and when people respond that way, it makes that part of me feel like accepted, right? But if you've met that version of me, you're a very special person to me because not everybody gets to meet that version of me. And so if you have, you are still a very important human to me. So, but the inner child me is like, oh, that's me. I'm Spot. It's kind of like when I'm doing Dr. Beep Boop, hello and welcome to when I'm doing that voice, the more childlike version of me is kind of hard to reach, right? That's dissociation still happening, but yes, honey. And this is how the childlike version of me is, Spot is very much like, I need a snack, because that's how I am. I need my snickety snacks. But you realize that learning to shut the fuck up is the skill you're building. And now he's like, holy shit, how dare you? But I'm decidedly not shutting up with all the shit we're doing, right? 2023 me, you know how to do this better than I do. Just think about the decisions you've made since then. And now me is like, yes, that's so right. I realized that just now. But it's like I'm not even doing it just for her, but for someone else. Future me waves. I'm gonna need this again, okay? Yeah, yeah. It's I have it in a way that's gonna be easier to read. Because, it's kind of hard. Like when it's just sound, I don't really have any visual markers for you. But so Voss and Shore's friendship. Shore is Blond and Car. I thought I would tack on a bit about their friendship because it's part of that show that night. It was part of the show. They met online. I think Voss saw Blond and Car's video, saw Shore's video. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm just going to say Blond and Car because that's the last thing I want to do is mispronounce her name. I'm not sure. What I do remember is that they spent some time talking about their friendship and their collab song. Blonde and Carr was saying she thinks Voss is the best musician in the world. And if you look at their aesthetics, it makes perfect sense that she'd see it that way. And they likely see each other that way. I don't have much to add to their friendship portion of it, but some things have a depth we don't need to measure. Yeah. Maybe that's the message for me in this moment as I look back over all of these versions of me and I look back to who I was then and how I sometimes feel this intense longing to go back to that time because I really was doing all of these exciting things. But I think that right there is something to think about. Some things have a depth we don't need to measure. Yeah. Yeah. Way to go past me. Way to go.